Hi, how are we doing? Welcome to 365 Explained. This is episode number 3, and today we're going to be talking about voice apps, I believe. My name is Ben, and I am joined by...
Zach,
Hello.
hello. Nice to see you all
So
again.
you are well placed to take us through voice apps, Zach. This is kind of your forte, your thing. So if I didn't know anything about voice apps, how would you describe them? What are they? Where do they live? What do we do with them?
Yeah, so I promise to keep this brief. We won't spend too much time going into each part of voice apps. But essentially, what voice apps are, it's a part of the phone aspect of Microsoft
Okay.
Teams phone. Okay, so the PBX aspect, and your voice applications, quite simply, are ways to make call flows within that PBX. So they're split into kind of like two different categories with another one floating around there as well. But they are auto attendants on call
Okay.
queues, and around voice apps as well. We'll talk around this notion of resource accounts
So
as well.
you say they're for doing call flows, but like if I'm in Teams and I've got a phone number, I can already divert calls to other people. I can have delegates. I can forward to my mobile. Like why do I need these? Where do they fit?
So these are more for, say, like business scenarios. So let's say you had like a mainline
Okay.
number, and you wanted to have an IVR kind of interactive voice response service on one
So
of
like a
those numbers, so a
menu, like
mainline
press
number.
1, press 2.
Exactly, yeah. So that would be considered an auto
Okay.
attendant, and then you have call queues, and these are more once the calls are inside your business. How can you best get those around to what we call them agents, or they're effectively, your users inside the business that are going to be taking
So
those
it's the
calls. Think of
contact
it
center.
like contact center light.
Okay.
Let's say that, and I hate that term, but no, it's more for let's say like let's say you had an IT support queue, you had a HR queue, those sorts of things. You can build those out via these call queues and create those flows
Right.
for people.
Okay. So go on then. You mentioned resource accounts. Like if we're starting with this, what do we need to look at? Resource accounts? Do we need to look at auto attendance queues? Like what do we want to do? Can you kind of run me through like an example scenario and kind of build one out, I guess?
Yeah, I always start with resource
Okay.
accounts because they're quite important. These are effectively on the back end how you are going to interact with these particular
So are these
queues.
exchange
So
resource accounts or something different?
yeah, so I actually don't know if they're exchange resource accounts, by the
They're
way.
different accounts.
Do
They're,
you
they're
know they're not?
disabled user accounts that have numbers associated with them.
Okay,
Essentially,
yeah,
functionally.
they are disabled accounts. Yeah, you're right.
Come on, you're playing expert
But
today.
yeah, but these resource accounts effectively what they do is they're not real user
Okay.
accounts, but they effectively hold a number or a resource for you to be able to put onto one of these auto attendants or a call queue to be able to interact with it or
Okay,
dial
so
that
if I remember
particular
my history of these
thing.
correctly, you didn't need to used to have resource accounts, but you do now need to have resource accounts, but they don't have to have a number associated with them. So effectively, Teams is doing the routing to the resource account user, which is then sending it to the queue, the auto attendant, doing whatever manipulation it needs. But that's kind of the container for owning the calls coming in.
Exactly right, yeah. And before these resource account license were a thing, you had to have like a dummy
Okay.
user account holding a Teams phone license or holding a license to be able to pass these calls between each other. Good thing now is these Teams phone resource account licenses or these resource accounts is a free license that you can assign to these accounts to be able to add these numbers to them. So it's actually no cost to have them assigned to call queues and auto attendants.
And how, like, is there a particular rule about how many of those we get, or like, is it just if you have Teams Phone, you're allowed them? Can you have them without Teams Phone? What's the deal there?
Yes, so you need to at least have one Teams phone license inside your tenant. Once you have that, you actually unlock 15 as standard, and then there is an allowance of it's 15 plus 10% of your Teams phone licensing that you have inside your
Okay.
tenant. So if you have 100 Teams phone licensing, whether that be the Teams Phone Standard or an E5, something like that that includes Teams Phone, you get 10% of those as well. In all honesty, in all my time working with customers, I've never seen anyone get charged if they've gone over that threshold. It's a zero cost license.
Do you just ask for more, do you, through Admin Center?
Yeah, however you would normally get licenses, so through Admin Center or through whoever your partner is for licenses, they can assign you those. But there's always that Microsoft may start charging for these in the future if you go over your threshold.
So the starting point is get the resource account licenses into your tenant, then you can create these resource accounts and then you can use them. Is there anything in particular about creating them? Like, do you just make a standard user and then give it this license, or what do you do?
Yeah, so you can create it directly in the Teams Admin Center. So I'm just going to open up the Teams Admin Center now. On the left-hand side under Voice, there is the resource accounts section, and you can actually come inside of here and add resource accounts and create them directly inside of your Teams Admin Center here.
There was a change here, right?
Yeah.
Like, you used to be able to do this as a Teams administrator, but now you need to have permissions outside of just the Teams RBAC.
Correct. Yes. So you actually need user administrator roles as well. So, you either need to be a Teams admin and also a user administrator to be able to create these resource accounts.
Or get someone else to do it in another team and then come back. Yeah.
Exactly that. Okay. Yeah.
So you had one open there, and there was a different category associated with them. Like, do you have to specify this is an auto attendant or this is a call queue, or what's the point in that?
Yes, you definitely do. So when you're creating these resource accounts, you have to decide if it's a resource account for a call queue or for an auto attendant.
So I've never paid much attention to that. Like, obviously when you're creating them, I set which one I want, but then I've been able to freely use them between them. Is that a Microsoft backend thing for tracking, or do you actually have to come and adjust that if you need to?
As far as I'm aware, you have to come in and adjust that between the two.
Okay.
You're not able to, have it as an auto attendant and then have it show up for, if you're assigning a resource.
So on your screen now, you've got a list of the resource accounts, the username associated with it, the phone number, which, as we've mentioned, you don't have to have. But then helpfully, there's also a column for whether they are licensed or unlicensed. So if you're troubleshooting or having problems, or they're new, this is like step one, right? Is make sure that your resource account has that correct license and shows okay in here.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where do we go next? What do we do after we've got our account up and running?
So after you've got your resource account up and running, you need to decide if you're making an auto attendant or a call queue. So we'll start with auto attendants. These auto attendants are, like I mentioned before, they're effectively like your main lines into your business. And one of the great features with auto attendants is you can have time of day routing. Okay. So you can create these menu options or, transfer the call to here, that sort of thing. But you can specifically do it during a certain time of day. So
they're kind of like a big if this then kind of tree, but you can have different trees based on in hours and out of hours. Can we do it based on holidays or other times of day, or how granular can we be?
Yep. So you can do in and out of hours. That's usually the main one that people will use. But there is a section for auto attendants as well that you can set holidays. So if you have holidays that, let's say the 3rd of July, the 4th of July, that happens the same time every single year. You can, around the 4th of July, you can come inside of here and configure a holiday on a particular auto attendant. And you can set those, throughout the years to happen. And then what will happen is, I call it kind of set and forget. So once that time of the year actually rolls around, the auto attendant will automatically flip over to what configuration you have set for that holiday.
So another interesting thing on the screen, you've got like the bit of TAC, which is in Teams Admin Center, then under Voice, then auto attendants. You've got a list of your attendants on screen, but I can see one of them has 2 resource accounts listed. Like, so we can have more than one resource account associated with an attendant or a queue. Why would we want to do that?
But effectively, what you can do is you can have multiple inbound numbers lead into that one auto attendant.
Okay.
So I had a customer that was consolidating offices. So they were going from 2 offices across Spain to 1 in Madrid. So what they wanted to do was they didn't want to lose that other number because they'd been given that number out to a lot of people. So instead, they just pointed that to their new office auto attendant. So effectively, if anybody did ring that, it would still all come into the
So
same
I'm assuming
auto
this is there's many different ways to do it, and there's not a right or wrong, but kind of a clean way of doing it is you have the number to a resource account, the resource accounts to whatever entity you want it in, and then you just duplicate that setup so that you know what's going where and how things are flowing.
Exactly, yeah. And it's also, if you wanted to, manage something more centrally, rather than having the Madrid office, this office, all as auto attendants. Oh, we want to go make a change. Let's make the change to 3. You make the change to 1. Because the numbers are all pointing to the same place, you've made that change global.
So go on then. We're like 10 minutes in. Give me, you've got 5 to 10 minutes to give me a high level. What do we do in an auto attendant?
Yeah. So let's click into one quickly, and we'll just jump into this test one that I mentioned before. First thing I'll mention is, so I'm in the Teams admin center, like I mentioned. We can have those multiple numbers, like we just spoke about. Couple of key things in here. This is that time zone thing that I was talking about before. So this is where your auto attendant is going to decide, what's considered in out hours and out of hours.
So we don't have to calculate for where our tenant is or anything like that. We specify the holidays based on, the date time, and then the time zone of the attendant dictates how that's interpreted.
Correct. Yeah. 9 a.m. based on this time zone. That's that sort of thing with how it will work. There's also a language section in here as well. So you can have voice inputs and actually text-to-speech inputs as well from the auto attendants that will read menu options, that sort of thing out to you. And you can choose one of the languages. I think there's 54 languages in this particular list to choose from. And this will dictate what language is spoken out.
So it's the primary language that any in or output from this attendant will use. And that's using the Azure voice services stuff on the back end.
Yeah. It's using Azure voice services. And then we have the actual flow. So what do we want this particular auto attendant to do? So we can have greeting messages, we can play an audio file, or have that text to speech that I mentioned before. And this will read out based on the language that was chose on the other screen. And then we have our routing options. I can straight away choose to just redirect this call, to a person, to another voice app. So this is where we'll probably come onto it in a little bit, but where we're talking about nested call flows, where you can have an auto attendant going into another auto attendant or call queue into another call queue. You can do that via these. You can transfer to an external phone number or a voicemail as well.
So what's the difference between a resource account and a voice app in here? Because do we not have to have one associated with the other?
So recently Microsoft made a change where nested auto attendants and call queues don't have to have a resource account associated with them anymore. Okay.
So we're going full circle. We didn't need to have them, but now we do need to have them, and now maybe we don't need to have them, depending on how things are.
Yeah, there are. We'll come into this. If we ever go into a call queues explained or anything like that, we'll go into this a little bit further in there. But effectively, yeah, if your top level always has to be licensed. Okay, so always has to have a resource account and license,
a free license.
But correct. Yeah, the free license. But below that, nowadays, with some caveats, they don't always need to have the resource account license.
Speaking of licensing and money, you said one of the options is you can divert to an external phone number, which I'm assuming comes up elsewhere as well. Is that free? Is Microsoft paying for that? Where's the cost of that coming from?
So that would come based on whoever you're using as a provider around, whether it be Operator Connect or calling plans, direct routing, that sort of thing. Whatever number is being used to dial out.
So however we have given a phone number to the resource account, the primary resource account from the queue would use that mechanism to pay for any diverts, redirects. etc. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. On this call routing section, this is the main reason why people use auto attendants. It's for those menu options. Okay. So, a couple of good things in here. You can force listen, so you can make people, listen to
You can
that.
infuriate your users by having a 2 minutes queue announcement.
Yeah, rather than just mashing 9 to try and get through to a particular person. And other things you can have on here is, you can upload that audio file. So press 1 for sales, press 2 for support. That can be
So we can have it branded in whatever the company voice is, or tone or style, rather than robot voice.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can have that text to speech again that we mentioned before, and it will read out in that particular language and inclination. Then we can actually set those menu options. So we can say in here, let's press 1 for sales, and then we redirect that somewhere. Okay. So we can redirect that to a person. So to one particular person, a voice app or a resource account, which we mentioned before, a voicemail, that's an M365 group voicemail, an external number. These two, which are slightly newer, these are announcements. Okay.
So this is kind of a similar set of options that we've had elsewhere, and I assume repeats, just with slight variations on the theme.
Exactly that, yeah. Importantly, voice command. So you can actually have voice inputs turned on for these queues as well. So instead of pressing the DTMF, 1 tone to get through, people can say sales. And where
do you find the voice recognition here is acceptable, or do you end up typing in shales to make sure that when people say sales, it actually interprets it correctly?
I've found that it's actually really good. So it's using, Azure Cognitive Services on the back end to understand where you need to go. So in my experiences, it's been quite good. Where you might need a little bit of refinement is this text-to-speech greeting message. So, when it's actually reading that text-to-speech out, depending on, what your business name is, and you might have to add a few commas and play around with this a little bit to get the text-to-speech to read out.
Just put the audio file in, right? Just record something, yeah. How many organizations are you the voice of?
I'm the voice of one in Canada, which was very flattering that they wanted a northern person to read out their voice announcements.
And they couldn't find one, so they made do with. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. They probably removed it by now.
Good stuff. And those dial keys, we can have 11 options, did I see, right? So we've got 0 to 9, and then hash and star or pound, depending on your localization.
Correct. Yeah.
Cool. And then what's directory?
So one thing you can have is directory search as well. So another key component to an auto attendant is dial by name functionality. Okay. So you can have the ability to search a directory, and that can be via dial by name or dial by extension. So you can say Ben Lee, and it will say, okay, do you want this Ben Lee or the 3 other Ben Lees that we have in the organization? And then it will, pass through to that particular user. Or you can also type that as well via, DTMF, and there's a good Microsoft Learn page about exactly what will and won't get picked up, from that directory search. But importantly, with directory search, we also have the option for a dial scope. So you can choose who you want to include and exclude from these particular directory
these
searches.
Are based off AD groups, I would assume.
Correct, yeah. So, Office 365 groups.
So we can exclude the executives or the C-suite or whatever from, people coming in and being able to ask to speak to them if we wanted.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, or what we do is we include just our sales team. They're the ones that are usually going to want to be reachable. Yeah. So they're the only ones.
I noticed just as you clicked off that other screen that we talked about building your workflow and all the nice places you can have it. But to kind of get through to this portion of the wizard, you had some options you hadn't filled in. So one of the options you clicked was just disconnect the call. So you've got your lovely auto attendant with your greeting, and then it's just nah, done, cut the call. I'm assuming that's where you're layering these things. There would be scenarios where that's kind of helpful, where you've got some other kind of an attendant in a queue, and then we're really sorry, we're closed, call back later, cut the call kind of thing.
Exactly that, yeah. And not to jump off auto attendance just yet, but in call queues, they've added the functionality now to once you disconnect a call, you can add that little snippet of information before you disconnect
Okay.
the call, which is quite nice. It's not quite hit auto attendance yet, but that's available for call queues.
Go on then. So we've got one. Well, I'll give you one more minute on auto attendance. What else should we know?
Probably the last thing I'd talk around with auto attendance without going in too much further detail is authorized users. And effectively what you can have is a group of users that are authorized for a particular auto attendant or call queue that can make changes to that queue or auto attendant directly in their Teams client.
We want to change the greeting. We want to change a redirect. We don't need to give someone a Teams RBAC role. We can like deal with it inside the Teams client.
Exactly. Yeah. Think of it as, we have a receptionist that we trust who's going to, make changes to the greetings if we require. We don't need that person to come in and put a ticket in with our IT team and then wait 3 to 5 days for that to be answered. They can just jump into their Teams client, make those quick changes.
So summary here then is auto attendance let us do date and time-based routing. We can build a flow with redirects and a menu. And then we didn't show it on here, but there is scope for having a different flow for out of hours and a different flow for holidays. And we can also do dial by voice or dial by extension to find people in the organization. And we have the ability to control who can manipulate settings to do with that auto attendant. Perfect.
Exactly.
Go on then, queues. These are your favorite things, right? How's the queue different?
Call queues. So you've got your calls that are coming into your main line or they're now into your business, but how do you manipulate those and how do you get those to the right people to actually take those calls? These are your call queues, okay? Anyone that's sat in a call queue, they are considered an agent of that call queue. And let's just step into one of these queues. I'll create a new one for this particular example. The first thing we're always asked in call queues, differently to auto attendance, it's the opposite way around for some reason. What resource account do you want to associate with this particular call queue? Okay. Now think of this. Let's say we're making a sales queue now, and we have a dedicated sales number. What we could do is have that dedicated sales number for this call queue. When salespeople are out and they're talking to people, they don't want to give out their personal DDI for whatever reason. They can give out the sales line number.
Have calls coming in directly to a queue. They don't have to hit an attendant first, or we can do both. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Important things for call queues. This is where we can do call-in IDs. Okay. So if you want particular users that are agents of a queue to be able to dial outbound as that queue's number, this is where we can
change your
do
number
that.
presentation so you look like you're calling from whatever that queue number is.
Exactly that. Yeah. So let's, this is something new for call queues, service level threshold. So in some of the reporting, and I'm sure we'll do an episode on Queues app eventually, because that's something that's very new to Teams. There is the ability to have a threshold, so you can add how quickly or how effectively your call queues are being handled. And what we can do inside of here, we can toggle it on, and we can say, within 2 minutes, I want all of my calls for this queue to be answered within 2 minutes. And then in some of the reporting, we'll have a have a bar indicator in there that will, any calls that are over that will push our SLA down, and then any calls under that will push it back up.
You mentioned Queues app there, and I know Queues app, is a Teams premium licensing feature. Are those reports inside the Queues app, and therefore using the service level threshold is a Teams premium feature? Okay.
Correct. Yeah, you can turn this on, but it's not being surfaced anywhere.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, it's only being surfaced in Queues app reporting.
But to be clear, everything else we have seen here is included in the Teams phone and Teams phone virtual user license, which is the resource account license, which are free. Well, not free, but like standard licenses.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I'll be sure anything that we talk about is premium. We'll kind of point that out specifically. Again, language. So the same language options that we had before, and we can play those system prompts. We can have specific greetings. Welcome to the sales queue.
But surely we've already had that on the auto attendant where we're like, welcome to Widgets Inc. Blah blah blah. Why do we want it on here?
Well, you can. It's not something you have to have on. It's a greeting that you want to choose. But if you want to say you're now waiting in the sales queue, something like that, for example,
to the caller.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you'll hear as the person press the button, it'll transfer to another queue. They'll kind of hear that, and then you can say, you're now in this queue. Music on hold. You can have the default Teams music, or you can upload your own audio file.
The default Teams music,
if you want to. It keeps me awake at night sometimes, and I will wake in a sweat when I hear it in public. Okay. So please, everybody, change the default Teams music on your call queues. But it's always best practice, to have an audio file, because you can be a lot more personal, with those audio files.
So if you're like some of the UK insurance firms, you can make sure you've got some really blown out music that sounds terrible and save it and pop it in here. Okay,
exactly that. Yeah. Now we have call answering. So this is effectively who's going to be your agents and how they're going to take those calls. Uniquely with Teams, you can add a Teams channel. Okay. So anyone that's part of a Teams channel, you can. So I've just gone through and searched for a sales team. If I add that and then choose the general channel, anybody that's inside of that general channel and is licensed correctly, so has Teams phone, enterprise voice enabled, they are now going to be an agent in that.
So this is like a way of continuing that Teams is unifying everything. It's like you should already have like a Teams and channel and membership structure based on M365 groups, but you can explicitly say, I want to use this team or this channel out of a team as the entity for where my users are.
Okay. Correct. Yeah. And this was a way, of potentially looking after the membership for queues as well. So, you could decide, the membership of that channel was who was actually going to be in the queue. So there's some issues with that around replication times, that sort of thing.
Is there a reason to use the channel versus the group? Like there used to be a calls tab that would go in the channel. Does Microsoft talked about depreciating that, and then I believe they got overruled, or
Yeah, they did. So they did say they were going to deprecate it and get rid of the channels tab. So inside of your Teams client, inside of your channel, it would add a calls tab. And they were going to get rid of that. They did, reverse and flip that, thankfully. So that's going to stay around for now. I'm not sure how much more feature set we're going to get from that.
But it is where it is, and other stuff will probably push into the Queues app, which is a premium thing. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, go on. We're hitting on half an hour. Let's pull through this.
Okay. So it shows your team, but you can also choose users and groups as well. So security groups, distribution lists, Office 365 groups, whatever, that can be your users, or you can go in and choose particular users to have them show up as agents in this particular queue. This can be mixed and matched as well, if you want. One thing to mention with the groups, it will go in alphabetical order. So any of the routing methods we choose, it will do that. Now, routing methods, I'll go through this super quickly. We have attendant routing. So
routing is how we distribute the call to the membership that we picked on the previous thing, right?
Correct. Yes. So that's the routing method, how agents are actually going to be distributed those calls. So attendant routing, this is when the call comes in, everybody's client is going to ring. First person to press answer, they're going to get that call.
So call rate.
Serial routing. Yeah. So serial routing, that will go first person, second person, third person. So it'll go down that list. You're fine
because you're Zach, so you're right at the bottom every time, right? Okay. I'm in trouble.
Yeah, you'll be getting that call first. Round robin. This is where it tries to distribute the calls evenly between particular agents throughout the day. So if you've had, 2 calls, I've had no calls, it's going to skip you in the queue and offer me the call first. probably seen as one of the more fairer ways, to distribute calls. And then longest idle. This is a Teams kind of specific one. It's going to use that presence that you have in Teams. So, you're green for available. Whoever's been available the longest in the queue, they're going to get the next call. Okay. One quick thing to mention, attendant routing, serial routing, and round robin routing. We can also turn on a toggle in call queues called presence-based routing, where it will look at the presence of a particular user. If you're red in a call, it knows you're not going to take that call. So it will skip you from the queue. Don't
bother sending
completely.
it to someone who's unlikely to be able to receive it. Unless there are scenarios where it's like high throughput reception, whatever, where you maybe want to have that disabled because they're just chunking through calls.
Exactly, yeah. Think of it like a VIP queue. We turn this presence-based routing off. No matter what, doesn't matter what's happening. If you see this call come up, you need to try and take it. Yeah, you can have agents be able to opt out of taking calls as well. So again, if this was that VIP queue, you might want to toggle that off so
like
they can step out of that particular queue.
But that's like, I'm going on my lunch. I'm not going to receive any calls. Thank you very much. But then I'm assuming the user has to remember when they come back to put themselves back in the queue and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, there's some capabilities with the Queues app, which will let you let leads opt agents back in so that you can force people to jump back into the queues if they forget. But yeah, premium feature. Callback. So 2 seconds on callback. Effectively, what you can do is users that call into a particular call queue after a certain amount of time or some conditions are met. These are time in the queue, the number of calls that are in the queue, or if there is not enough agents opted into that queue or signed in, you can offer a callback to a particular user. Okay. And then that will make the callback
that's kind of structured
outbound
quite nicely with a greeting and a press a button to do it. I'm assuming the fee for that comes from the resource account of the queue in the same way the redirects from the auto attendants came from however that was licensed for telephony.
Correct. Yeah. There's an option, if the callback could not be completed for whatever reason, an email can get sent to an M365 group that, people can check on and manually ring that callback if they need to.
Stuff.
Coming up towards the end now, we have exception handling. So exception handling split into 3 things. Call overflow. So how many calls are actually going to be in your queue? You can say, I want a maximum of 2 calls in my queue. As soon as that 3rd call hits, what do we want to do? We can disconnect the call. And like I mentioned before, we can play an audio file or a greeting. Sorry, we're super busy. Disconnect.
With abnormally high call volumes the entire time.
Yeah. Or we can redirect that call to somewhere else.
Menu is very similar to what we had before of like a person, a number, a voicemail, etc., etc.
Call timeout, similar to overflow, but this is time-based. I want all of my calls to be answered within 3 minutes. 3 minutes and 1 second hits. We're going to hit this
That's
exception.
Not the same as our
and do
SLA. This is like actually do an action when we hit a particular timer.
And it's an important thing you mentioned there to make sure that these are you're thinking about both of these at once. Because if you have an SLA that calls are constantly timing out and they're moving somewhere else before your SLA is hit, then
because the SLA isn't actually the amount of time the user has been on hold, for want of a better word, to your organization. It's how long they've been on hold in this queue. So if our SLA is 5 minutes and our queue dumps out after 3 minutes, amazing. We're never going to breach our SLA.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And similarly with callback, if your call timeout is shorter than your callback, and there's some good in the GUI now. When you're configuring callback, it will tell you, hey, this callback's never going to be hit because your call timeout's not long enough.
These timers are from the time that the SIP signaling started for the call, not from the time the ringing started or any of that. So if you have some direct routing that's really complicated where there's quite a long call establishment time, you need to account for that in the call wait.
Yeah, I definitely would, yeah. If it's 3 minutes, always add on maybe another 10 seconds to make sure that you're covered there. And then lastly, for exceptions, we have no agents opted in or even
Okay.
signed in. So there's a little bit of intelligence in here that we can say, there's no one that's even going to be able to take this call. What we used to have to do is wait for that timeout to hit. But now we have this particular exception where we can say disconnect or redirect this call, to somewhere else.
All right. And then I noticed the last thing is the authorized users. That sounds like it's going to be similar to the auto attendants, where it's these people in my organization can deal with changing stuff to do with this. And there's some policy things in here that we can cover separately as well, right? To tie that together.
Yeah. The voice application policies. Again, if you're talking about non-premium stuff, it's effectively changing greetings. If you want to do anything more than change greetings, it's the premium license.
So go on then. To wrap us out, I've got 2 questions for you. Give me your most common scenario for an auto attendant and a call queue, and then I'll hit you with the other question.
Okay. Most common is quite simple, to be perfectly honest, and it's going to be an auto attendant with a number of call flows, sitting off the back of that. So press 1 for sales, press 2 for support, those sorts of scenarios. And then off the back of those call flows, you'd be surprised the conversations I've had with customers where they've gone, oh, I didn't realize Teams could do that. But it's effectively just a nested call queue into another call queue. Let's say like a IT support, if no one answers, we'll go to, a second line, something like that, for example.
All right.
You can definitely do that.
So to follow on from that, what is the cleverest use of call queues and auto attendants that you have seen or that you have implemented?
So we actually use just standard Teams phone PBX at LoopUp. So we offer a 24/7 follow the sun support service. So what we've actually done is built, using the auto attendants and that time of day routing, you can ring any of our numbers at any time. Because of the way the auto attendants are set up, you will always get through to whoever is live and taking calls at that particular time. So we kind of have those auto attendants with all call queues. We just effectively follow that.
Kind of my main takeaway from this and from doing it through consulting for a little while is these things are super powerful, but they're also kind of simple. But you need to map them out. So like draw a diagram, build a Visio, do something. So you'll follow the sun there. You're going to have so many layers of attendants and queues and resource accounts. Is like, make sure you draw that out and map it to then build it. So that when it doesn't work, when you troubleshoot it, when you're testing, you've got the flow of what that looks like. Does that sound sensible?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
All right, take us home. What's your 30-second takeaway from all of this stuff?
Well, if you've not used, some of the auto attendants and call queue stuff with inside of Teams phone, or if some of the stuff I've spoke about today, you've kind of gone, oh, I didn't realize that you could do that in Teams phone. Definitely give it a go and have a look what's on offer. You'd be surprised, although some of this stuff does sound basic, how complicated of a queue you can build natively inside of the Teams phone.
All right, good stuff. Well, I've got a key takeaway as well, which is we don't have our socials set up yet, but we do have a YouTube channel. So if you found this as an audio format podcast through any of the standard things, could you please head on to YouTube, find us there, and just pop a comment on this video asking that we do a special on call queues to make calling apps. What's it called? Queues apps.
Queues
there
app.
you go, to make Zach nice and happy. But I guess for now, thank you very much. Hopefully that's useful. And bye-bye, and we'll catch you next time.
Cheers all. Bye.